Welcome to the Navigating Solo podcast, a dedicated platform where we explore the unique needs and concerns of solo aging with a focus on empowerment, connection, and proactive planning. I'm your host, Ailene Gerhardt, and today I am excited to welcome our guest, Cathleen Toomey. Kathleen led the sales and marketing efforts of the Riverwoods Group from 2007 to 2024, during a period of expansive growth, growing from 2 to 5 nonprofit continuing care retirement community campuses. Kathleen is known for her TEDx talk, Secrets to Successful Aging, and is a frequent presenter. In 2021, she launched an award winning podcast, Seniority Authority: Get Smarter About Growing Older, to answer questions on aging. New Hampshire PBS aired a half-hour Seniority Authority television show that was distributed nationally. Kathleen's extensive brand building experience includes work for Timberland, Stonyfield Farm, Babson College, and Bentley University. A graduate of Fordham University and Fairfield University, Kathleen began her career in ad agency work in New York City. She is now a consultant for individuals planning for their best future life. Kathleen, I am thrilled you are joining us today.
Oh, it's so great to see you again. I am thrilled to be on this podcast.
I really look forward to the conversation I know we will have that will only benefit our listeners, and feel really grateful for your time. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
Sure.
So, for you, how do you feel aging today is different than how it was for generations before us, specifically our parents' generation?
Oh, this is the best way to start because we are different than any other generation that came before us. So we are very different than our parents or our grandparents because people now are living longer than ever before. In fact, we're living longer than we ever anticipated. When Social Security became a law in 1940, the average life expectancy was 65, which is why it kicked in at 65. Today, the average life expectancy is in our 80s and 90s. And the longer you live, as we say in long term care, the longer you live, the longer you live. So if you make it to 64, you're going to make it to your 80s. If you make it to your 80s, you will live to 92, 94. We have the opportunity to live a much longer life. And the challenge is that our parents didn't necessarily expect to live this long, but we can plan. We are going to get longer lives. So it's up to us to figure that out.
So that whole longevity piece, right? The notion that people might be outliving their life insurance policies, that life expectancy is longer, that all of these different pieces, I think, and also throw in for the baby boomer generation, nothing was on script from the
Yes.
time they arrived,
Yes.
uh,
The
certainly on the
the
planet. And
boomers have changed every social convention
right.
come across, from when they got married, how they educated themselves, travel, the desires that they were able to fulfill, getting divorced more often, being solo more often. Everything has changed, and so aging has changed. But what I think a lot of people don't understand, it's a good news that we're living longer because we have the chance to get new knees, new hips, and keep going. Do that marathon, do that travel. Our grandparents never had those kinds of opportunities. They didn't have the technology, the medicine. So this is all good. What's different for our generation is that as we are aging longer and living longer lives, the profile of the people alive in the United States to support us has dramatically changed. So in the
Mm.
1950s, you just take a look at the US Census. In the 1950s, there were 7 people in the workforce for every retiree. That has dropped. It's an inverted. So in 2011, there were 4 people in the workforce for every retiree. And that's not 4 people in the super sexy long-term care industry. It's 4 people in total. So there were people around to provide support if and when we need that. And that's a really important thing that I think a lot of older adults, and including myself, 60 plus, do not think about. They think I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to live my life. And when I need help, I'm just going to pick up the phone. Someone's going to help me. That's and more costly because of the dwindling workforce. So that's something we have to think about, especially those of us who are solo agers.
I always remind people that we have a caregiving shortage. All of the statistics you and framing you just shared in terms of the workforce and how people are living our lives, and somewhat joke that if you put that in a blender, we're not dealing with a really tasty smoothie.
Mm-mm.
That
No.
right? That notion of, okay, so we know those pieces are a factor for us. And how do we, from the ground up, affect that change? We also know older adults and people just in general would rather continue to age in the community in which they live. Some people refer to it as aging in place. People who know me know I appreciate the work done under the aging in place banner. Sounds a little not as dynamic as I would like, but I know it needs to be called
Mhm.
something. But the notion that we'd like to continue to age where we are with the not only our own home and space, if that makes sense for us, but the services that surround us, all these other pieces, our community, our friends, etc. Do you think that when people you come from having a senior living background,
Yeah.
right, of working on senior living campuses, the abbreviation being CCRC. So that when people look at these different models for senior living and they say, I really want to age in place, do you think that people have yet a clear understanding truly of what that means, what might be needed, that notion of, is it as simple as just picking up the phone, or at that point pressing the button in our head or whatever technology will avail us, that people have that clear way to map out what will aging in place, aging where I am, look like, if that's on the short list of ways I'd like to decide about living continually where I am, or possibly making a move.
No.
Nicely done. Words. And the perfect word there is no.
Great. This is a great topic to unpack, and I'm so glad that you
Mhm.
brought it up because to me, when people say I'm aging in place, that just means do not ask me any questions at Thanksgiving or Christmas. I am aging in place. Stop with the questions, ignore and pass the turkey. Don't want to talk about it. And my mission, my passion is for people to get smarter about growing older. That's the subtitle of my podcast. That's kind of what I'm doing now as a consultant. And so I think we suffer from a lack of imagination. People say, I want in place, which means I want to stay in my home. I want everything to be the same because as long as I stay at home, nothing is going to change. I'm not going to get older. I'm not my hip. I'm not going to need any help. I'm just going to stay here and everything's going to stay the same. When change happens to everyone, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, and most times it's both. So you
Mm.
don't live the same life that you lived 10 years ago. So what makes you think 10 years from now, it's going to be exactly the same? So what I say to people is you have to think about, what is life going to be like when I can't drive? What
Mm.
is life going to be like when some of my best friends move away to be closer to their children? What is life going to be like when climbing up to the second floor is challenging and going down to the cellar to do my laundry is challenging? If you want to age in place, then it's incumbent upon you to make a plan for what that looks like. So you take the statistic, AARP did a study, 80% of Americans want to live at home. And I think that's low. Of the people that are living at home, 90% of them are getting care from family.
Mm.
So aging in place is also another way of saying, I am not making a plan. I'm going to wait until something happens, and then someone else is going to take care of it. And so, as solo agers, if we don't have family that we are going to rely on, it is incumbent upon us to make a plan for that. And I think that independence means you have made all of the decisions for what your life is going to look like, what your care is going to be that you would prefer. And you have made those decisions before you even need it. So many people today, and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of older adults, so many people think that independence means I'm staying in my home by myself. That's not independence, because nobody is really independent. Independence is saying, I'm staying at home until the time when X happens. And then I'm going to bring in care, or I'm going to move somewhere, or I'm going to do this. You have to have a plan, because sticking your head in the sand and saying, I'm aging in place, don't talk to me, is not a.
It's not an effective plan for sure. It also speaks to the notion of proactive planning versus reactive, right? That notion that if we are the ones, as you said, looking at the different components and being able to inform them with our wants and don't wants, then we do have that independence, that agency, all of that. And as a healthcare advocate, I always remind people I can't help anyone change any of the medical pieces. None of us are psychic enough for any of that. But how we handle that, how prepared we are, how proactive we are when we need to go to a medical appointment, when we need to go to receive care in a care facility for whatever reason. All of that proactive yields a better outcome. Again, you can't change the
Right.
medical, but yields a better outcome because of that plan. So there isn't that reactive. I know you were in marketing, and when it came to being at Riverwoods, it would not surprise me if people gave a call into the sales office or whatever a week after someone had a fall or someone had something where living in their environment previously where they were living on their own, because independent has a different
Mhm.
context there, of course. And that's just not a good fit going forward. But if Riverwoods, for example, had been on the short list of the proactive plan of searching, we'd have a better sense of what's available, what might be needed, all of that. I'm a huge fan of proactive. We as human beings, as we well know, are procrastinators and reactive. So every one of these conversations, the ones you're having with older adults in general and on Seniority Authority specifically, I know help shift people towards that proactive thinking because you're giving them reliable tools to do that. That aging in place piece, that what does that look like? What do I need to consider? I think is really important. We're living also at a time where there are a lot more studies and a lot more focus, research oriented on aging past the age of 65, which is refreshing. And so I know that you're familiar with the Harvard study and the whole concept of keys to living a long and happy life. Are there particular takeaways that really inform you already thinking about this because that's how you're built? But are there pieces that informed that further for you
Oh,
that came out?
yes, and I think that you and I are both doing similar things. We're both doing a lot of community education. We both are doing this work and these podcasts, personal passion, not certainly out of making any money. So that is my passion, is for people to understand they have agency over their own lives. In my parents' generation, the
Mhm.
assumption was it's all genes. You either have it or you don't. And do we know now that we can change so much of our health span, what they're calling health span, and to have a healthier, longer life. So my podcast, every single episode is what can the listeners do now to improve their quality of life. And Bob Waldinger, he's wonderful at Harvard, and I've interviewed him a couple of times. And what I think is really interesting, especially for this audience, is that he hit Harvard studies, does the most comprehensive study on health and longevity, and it comes down to one thing. Says when hard ever boil anything down to one this good relationships keep us bigger and
Mm.
healthier. And so when I was talking to him, I said, okay, I'm single. What does that mean? I don't have a partner. Am I going to die early and miserable? And he said, no, of course. It's the small group of intimate friends that you have, those friends you can call in the middle of the night when something's really happened, as well as the person that you know at the dry cleaner, the mailman, the woman that you see every morning when you're walking your dog, the person at the bagel place in Brookline that you love and you saves that last cinnamon roll for you. Those connections, that fabric of our society that weave us together, that is as important, or not equally as important, but that's important as well as your intimate relationships. So the moments that connect us to people. And that to me was really amazing. I think of the work that so many researchers and scientists are doing. I think of Becca Levy, who I
Mm.
totally love. She wrote Breaking the Age Code. Sure, she studied cohorts of people who were going in for surgery at Yale, and one cohort was like, "Oh, I'm 87, I'm getting a new hip, everything happens to me. I am miserable, I can't believe I'm so old." The other group was, "I'm 87, about time I got a new because I wanna hike the Camino in Spain, and I'm looking forward to that. I am 87, I could do a lot as soon as I get this hip fixed." She looked scientifically at people who had a positive attitude towards aging and a negative attitude toward their own aging. And the people who had a positive attitude not only recovered faster and got on their feet faster, but they also lived 7.5 years longer than the people who had a negative attitude. And we have to police that in ourselves because,
Mm.
as talking to all the experts that you've talked to and I've talked to, ageism is rampant in our and it traits our brains. So we look in the mirror and we start criticizing ourselves.
Mm.
That's terrible. So yes,
Right.
I am very focused helping people reframe how they think about their own aging. It it literally will add years to your life.
Becca Levy's book is outstanding. I'll make sure to have it as a link in the show notes. I like to make sure that any of the things we've covered are able to be followed up on, even the alphabet soup of senior
Oh,
living, being able to understand that. So for me, in the work with solo agers, for me, that support network is foundational,
Yeah.
right? That notion of, and I do an exercise with people, which I didn't create, actually, a solo ager in Canada did about 40 years ago. But it's mapping out your support network, right?
Mhm.
Looking at where you are in the absolute middle of a set of concentric circles. Who are your intimates, those you're most closely connected to? The next ring is people who are friendships who may and may not fluctuate. Your
Right.
3 a.m. people, as you referred to. You didn't call them 3 a.m. people, but
3
3 a.m.
people,
people.
that works.
Right. And then people who you're connected to through participation groups, whether that be professionally, personally, faith oriented, exercise, what affinity, whatever your interests are. And then the last circle, which is still a connection to you, but farther out, is the concept of exchange. Who are people that you are connected to through paid services, whether that's your CPA or the hair salon or your personal trainer, your therapist, whomever. And certainly those people can also fluctuate in and out of those
And
circles.
let's not
And those
forget,
support,
sometimes your hairstylist is also your therapist.
your therapist, right? Yes. And a lot of those different relationships look very different than perhaps what the title may necessarily, or the moniker may necessarily infer. And also, I think that having a sense of that can sometimes help you see where there might be gaps and see where there's opportunity, right? Those, all of those pieces of the bank teller, the person at the coffee shop that you go there at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday and look, so are other people. You see the same
Yeah.
people, right? All of those opportunities to enhance relationships, those different kinds of places, libraries, coffee shops, et cetera, can be referred to as third places. I talk about third places a lot. Are you familiar with the
Yes.
third place concept?
Yes.
Right. So by an urban sociologist, Ray Oldenburg. So that whole concept of where is there opportunity, that approach to a happy life, that we may think solely about the folks that are part of our family of choice or family in other
Mhm.
ways. For solo agers, it's usually more intentional in who's a part of those circles. Not always, but often. And then where are all those other opportunities to enhance that support network? So I love that approach, and I love that there continues to be more and more affirming research about how foundational our support networks are as we age. I think that's really critical. And for people who like reading things, we'll make sure also to link the Harvard study. All of those pieces are really important as well. So you shared in a couple of different ways you self-identify as a solo ager,
Yes, I
right?
am.
You proudly. And you also are quite an accomplished podcast host. I think that's fantastic. And Seniority Authority is an excellent resource. The fact that it then had the opportunity to have an even farther reach through PBS, I think is just absolutely
Thank you.
fabulous. Are there particular memorable, possibly surprising, maybe just memorable insights that guests have offered about thriving as one ages?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Probably the one that is most remarkable or most, I guess, the most asked question that I get. And I answer from a guest on my podcast who's written a couple of books on dementia. Maureen
Mhm,
O'Connor, she is a neuropsychiatrist in your neck of the woods, and work has also been reinforced by other studies that we can change the likelihood of getting dementia by changing three things in our lifestyle, which sleep, and socialization. So
mm,
the work of the Harvard study, which by the way is in a book called The Good Life, Dr. Robert Waldinger came out last year, January last year. So her book, Maureen O'Connor's book, is 7 Ways to Manage Your Memory, and there's another book also, 6 Ways to Do Something. Anyway, what she is saying is that if you concentrate on getting and good quality sleep. If you exercise regularly and including if you're older, some form of weightlifting, if you have healthy socialization, those things help reduce your chance of dementia by 50%. And we know that loneliness among older adults is particularly poignant for solo agers, and loneliness is a stronger stronger predictor of early death than smoking. So loneliness is more dangerous than smoking. So again, all
Right.
of this science now is saying we
Mhm.
have to make an effort to be connected, and it's not easy. If you are living alone and you don't drive at night, or you anticipate that you can't drive at night, and your neighbors move away, the neighbors you've known for so long, they move, new people move in, and they have kids and they're busy and they're have faster schedule, your world gets smaller. And you have to make an effort to keep meeting people. And this is really important. Don't give up on friendships when you are 70 or 60. And I have to say, I recently attended a funeral at Riverwoods for one of my very favorite residents, T. Alcock Hood. She met her husband at age 82 and
Fabulous.
married him, first marriage, and don't give up. And she's just like wonderful biochemist, PhD. She married a neurosurgeon. I mean, she's a super smart person from Tasmania, really did a lot of unique things in her life, but she was happy being single, and then she found love. So don't shut out the opportunity for new friendships and try to make an effort to make new friends, because at some point you may outlive your friends. So you want to have friends of different ages, and
Right.
that keeps you relevant and young, looking forward, not always.
That age diversity piece, I think, is so important. I also think that we know that as we get older, it's harder and harder to make new connections. We possibly retire. The whole pandemic component of going remote, right? And so we don't have that in person
Right.
3D. There are plenty of people we've met in 2D from the waist up.
Mhm.
And then you have occasion to meet them in 3D, and you're like, I thought you'd be shorter. I didn't realize you were that tall. All of that, which I know resonates with many people who are listening and watching this conversation. All of those pieces, the notion that, again, from that health perspective, we know that when people are socially connected, they adhere to medication schedules more diligently. There's hygiene commitment more diligently, the feeling of belonging and being connected. But it's hard.
Yeah.
I have the opportunity to give community education talks where I always remind people, look, I'm sharing all of this information, but I don't think this is easy. This
Yeah.
is not, here's a slide on this and I've solved it. It's hard. If you're an introvert, if you're an extrovert, if you're somewhere in between, if you've retired, if you don't have natural, what you feel to be the previous feeder patterns for connecting with new people, if you are someone concerned with caregiving for others as well as navigating your own world, your attention, your opportunity to build connection might be limited, might be shifted, your energy, obviously, as well. And taking those little opportunities, like you said, wherever you see them, saying hello to someone or saying thank you to some, right? And I always remind people to volunteer to help someone else before they need help themselves. One, I feel truly that it is the right human thing to do.
Mhm.
But additionally, it also demonstrates you're willing to be a part of a team and you might likely need others on your
Yeah.
team. And so all of those pieces, that connection, and I have a feeling that connection has come up. I think you said you're approaching 80 episodes or have just
Just
passed
past 80
80 episodes.
episodes.
And I can only presume there are many through lines
Mhm.
as part of the conversation. But I would guess that social connection and its impact on aging is one of those through lines. Say that.
Absolutely, and that's why more as more and more research comes out and more books I have it's not here, but I have a shelf of the 80 episodes most people have been authors or research. I have more than 80 books on the topic of aging, and anyone that wants to subscribe to my podcast can get a reading list because I have a whole bookshelf.
That's
Yeah,
fabulous.
because,
Yeah.
like, this is as we were talking about earlier, we are all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to help each other find the way through it. Sometimes it's videos, sometimes it's reading. But the thing is, you need to extend yourself, even the introverts. And you just brought up volunteering, and volunteering is not only a wonderful thing, but it also absolutely brings the person who's volunteering more positive energy than if you're receiving. And I
Mhm.
have been on many local boards and nonprofits, and it makes you feel so good. And I think one thing that keeps people from reaching out to others is all of this negative self-talk is I'm not as fit as I used to be. I'm not as this as I used to be. That person, we're comparing ourselves.
I don't wanna burden them. I
Yeah,
don't wanna
yeah.
intrude, right? All of
Someone
that.
said, and I can't remember who's but very smart, not smarter than me, said, comparison is the thief of joy. So
Ah.
we're just not, we put ourselves down so much. And so we don't feel confident enough to
Mm.
reach out. But if you start volunteering and you start giving back, you are more grateful for what you have and grateful for the opportunity to share something with others. And it starts weaving you into that fabric. And I haven't done as much research as I should on the power of volunteering, but I think that's really important. For those of you who are retired, there are so many opportunities, so many organizations in need, whatever you are interested in, there you
It's
can
there.
do to help.
Absolutely. At the end of September is September 28th is Good Neighbor Day, and so the going back a little bit to our conversation related to isolation and loneliness and the power of connection, and there is a national movement around getting to know your neighbor, whether that's in a high-rise building, in a suburban, urban, ex-urban,
Rural.
different kinds of
Yeah.
communal, rural, whatever communal living, any of those. And so they actually generated like a bingo card set of ideas. And it's not one of those things like National Pizza Day or National Cheesecake Day, which just shows up in some kind of zeitgeist somewhere. This is an actual thing that actually came about through Jimmy Carter's administration and now is an annual event on September 28th. This year was a Saturday, but the opportunity to build around that, right? And remind people of days like that, just like we do about ageism awareness, which moves around a little bit in October. But all of those pieces of plugging people into the larger things that might, everybody has different comfort levels too. So for someone, a large group, a charity walk may be the perfect fit and entryway into an organization. And for someone else, it's one to one helping with reading or grocery shopping or something. And so I think that all of those pieces are so important. And I think the more we talk about them and the more we recognize as you reflect on that self talk, that notion that what I'm telling myself on the inside, and also everyone else knows how to do
Yeah.
this. I don't know how to do this, but everyone else does, which means someone somewhere between when you finished your schooling, whatever that was, whenever that was, and today took a class you were never offered. Guess what? The class wasn't offered. How to be a grown up in so many ways, right? And so all of those pieces of learning from and with each other, which is the ideal, in stepping just slightly out of our comfort zone. And we all have
Yeah.
that, right? No matter whether we think of ourselves as a risk taker or not. I have a feeling also probably comes up in your conversations. When it comes to solo aging, people will say to me, "Is there a definition?" And I joke, it's for me, it's a framework. I'm not handing out membership cards. It's not a member organization of some kind. Like, you now can check out solo aging resources like a library card. That's not what it is. It's more of a framework, and at least in the work that I do and how I navigate it. But are there misconceptions or gaps that come up sometimes when you have conversations with thought leaders, experts, really smart people about solo aging that you try and shift the perspective or anything, either through the podcast or in the multitude of conversations I'm sure you have throughout your week?
That's a great question, and I think the short answer is yes. There are a lot of misconceptions. There are misconceptions among very smart people. I am consulting for financial advisors who want me to work with their clients who are trying to navigate this space and they don't really understand the different kinds of things. So, for example, where might you live? There are continuing care retirement communities. Those are generally nonprofit. Those are generally, you have to move in. You're independent, so you can't move in when there's a crisis. So earlier about if you plan ahead, you can get a list for a continuing care retirement community, but it's not something that you can call after your hip is broken or after you get diagnosis of dementia. Figure that out.
Mhm.
There are other standalone memory care centers and assisted living places and skilled nursing places. And there's tremendous misinformation about what each of those are. So, one of the most popular podcasts that I've done is one that I explain the difference between assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, and independent living. And people are just looking for information. And you're right, there's no roadmap for this. Our parents didn't do this, our grandparents didn't do this. Everybody died earlier. We were living agrarian lives or factory lives, and people didn't live this. Now people live this long, and our parents' generation still think of it as the convalescent home. The retirement communities today are all this. I have a book that I have written, a booklet that I have written that readers can reach out to me for, which gives you questions to ask if you're considering a continuing care retirement community. If you don't know what that is and you want to learn about it, I have guests on that too. There is so much misinformation about
That's
aging,
fantastic.
and people say, "I'll just bring a nurse in to take care of me." You won't find
Right.
a nurse. You're lucky to find a personal care worker, not an LNA, not a nurse. So I think there's just because nobody wants to think about it. I say to people, you like to think about what your next vacation is, or you're going to get a new car, what car that is. Nobody shops around for retirement communities. Oh, goody, let's check this out. But when you
Right. That's
really
part of the
think
human factor, right? Mhm.
about what is,
Of
how
course.
do we see ourselves living? And
Mhm.
if and when we need help, what is that gonna look like? So if we've done the fantastic exercise that you mentioned and done our concentric circles, how many of those
Mhm.
people would we call upon to help meal prep and help us house? Or do we it's a vast unknown.
And I think that we talk about different things. April has things related to April 16th is Healthcare Decisions Day
Sure.
because Shakespeare was so wise and reminded us that the only things we can't get away in life, yeah, is death and taxes. So if we've looked at taxes on April 15th, then we should be prompted to look at our healthcare decisions on April 16th. It's a good reminder. October was Health Literacy Month. So many different kinds of literacy that we are just not equipped. It's not because we've failed in any way. We're not provided, again, you're not handed this manual or this roadmap of congratulations. Here's how you figure these things out. Here's how you seek reliable information. Here's how you understand activities of daily living, abbreviated as ADL, from CCRC, from a sniff. You know how many times I've explained to someone's not being rude when they say you're right. A healthcare professional is not saying you're off to a sniff. That's not a rude comment. It's a skilled nursing facility. But if you don't speak the language, how can you make an informed decision? I don't know if you can tell I'm slightly passionate about this, but I always recommend to people the website whereyoulive.matters.org.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason I do is because it is from the Association for Senior Housing. It's a government website, so it's nonprofit. And it helps with, and probably would be a great resource to supplement many of the podcast episodes. And possibly you could have someone come on just to talk about that. It helps you with understanding what those different options are, ways to assess what might work for you, questions to ask, all of those pieces. And so I also recommend to people that, and I'll put it again in the show notes, as another resource as people are building their toolboxes, seeking out the booklet. You've authored other great resources, finding out about what's on the reading list, the virtual bookshelf, right? That kind of thing. All of those pieces, because in order to make informed decisions, we have to have reliable resources to do that, or be lucky enough to land on the smart people who know just a little bit more than we did 5 minutes ago, to be able to plug into those resources. I think resource sharing and knowing where to go, I think for solo agers, again, not feeling as though they may not have that 3 a.m. person or that person to ask. So they'll just skip the whole thing. I always give the example of going to a colonoscopy, which is a very universal. So if I don't have someone, I can take a cab to the colonoscopy. If I don't have someone to sign me out of that, or something else in which I have received anesthesia, I can't go to the procedure.
Right.
When we talk about our health outcomes, that's not a net positive for our health outcomes. That is a major barrier for solo agers and anyone in a daytime setting who may not have someone to ask to do those. They don't offer colonoscopies at 9 p.m. at night. So when someone might be home from work or able to give you a ride. And so those kinds of things become barriers. And I think that people having a greater insight, we were talking about possibly what might be misconceptions or gaps in understanding when it comes to financial planning, estate planning, the notion of a beneficiary and the language around that, that in previous models for financial advisors and attorneys, all those disciplines I love immensely and do wonderful things. No one should hear that I am, but that notion of beneficiary, what does a beneficiary look like in a previous model as opposed to now? How can someone choose to leave parts of their estates or have somewhere they volunteered benefit after they're gone as part of their legacy? Shifting some of that language, shifting the language on websites, you and your loved ones. If I look at that website and I don't have loved ones, or I don't think I do, does that professionals, will they still work with me? Do they understand me? All of those language pieces. So I think the more conversations we have where good, smart people are advising other good, smart people, I think will truly make a huge difference.
I think where it's up is when something happens and you're in the hospital and you're admitted, or then you have to go somewhere for rehab. You've got a discharge planner. She will basically say, where do you want to go? And then you have hours to make the decision. people don't realize how complex this is and where to go. And there's a great website called MedicareCompare.gov
Mhm.
about which you can go there, type in your location, and has all of the Medicare surveys for whatever facility you're looking at. You can take a look at them, understand whether they're good or bad. Do they have a 1-star, 2-star, 5-star rate? But it's a lot of work to do at the moment when you are standing there and a discharge planner says, "Where do you want to go?"
Especially as a patient, where if you were 100%, you wouldn't be there as a patient.
Exactly.
You'd be at home or some other location you desire. So, again, back to that proactive, using those resources ahead of time, that if I were to need to go to a rehab facility, skilled nursing or otherwise, what would be my
Yeah.
top 3? What That doesn't mean you need to call and check on bed
No.
availability every morning as part of your routine, but it does, again, in that proactive toolbox of what would be my, even the notion of sharing that there are ratings, of star ratings, of safety
Mhm.
ratings. There's a great organization called Leapfrog that each year releases their safety ratings for care facilities in your area, and you can look that up geographically as well. We'll also put the link in show notes. But all of those pieces of proactive, of having the reliable tools so that I can make an informed decision, back to that
Yeah.
independence, that agency, all of that. I think that it's really hard to navigate these things. The thing that I love about podcast platforms and other recorded, whether someone watches it on YouTube or some other video platform, you can hit
Mhm.
pause. You can go and listen to that again. You can decide you've had enough after 5 minutes and they've hit on a topic that you're completely overwhelmed. And next week, I'm going to go watch another 10 minutes or listen to another 10 minutes.
A podcast. I had never listened to a podcast before I started mine, but I live in a small town, Exeter, New Hampshire. Everyone that I knew that I worked for a retirement community. So people started coming up to me and asking me all these questions. And I didn't know the answer, but I certainly knew my nursing friends. So done the
Mhm.
answers. And then I thought, if it's me that people are asking, then there is a whole generation that need this information. And this is what people are listening to. They're listening to podcasts and it's easy. You can go to the website, Seniority Authority, look for the topic, click that one episode and listen. And then you don't have to listen to the whole thing. You don't have to listen to all 8
Right.
episodes. It's designed to help you answer those questions. We all should help each other live a better and easier and happier life. So that's the whole
Absolutely.
reason I did the podcast is because that's what people listen to now.
And how they access information, informed information, reliable information, of course, as well. I think there's so much more. I have a feeling you and I could probably do a 4 or 5 hour, 6 hour, your podcast, my
Yes.
podcast. We turn the tables a little bit. You didn't have to press record. You have to worry about the technicalities of editing, and you get to cruise that way. So I know that we could continue to have additional robust conversations. And I welcome the opportunity to do that as well. In shifting gears just a little bit, we talk about a lot of different subjects that touch on our expertise, that touch on our passions. If there were a particular skill that you could instantly master or a talent, does this something pop into your mind?
Absolutely.
And what is it?
Sleep on demand. If I
Ah,
had a
nice.
superpower, I would want 2 superpowers. One is the ability to sleep on demand. The second is to fly, to, like, absolutely fly somewhere.
I was gonna ask if the superpower involves
It
capes, but I think you just
ah,
shared that it does.
yes, but I'm an insomniac. I stay up late and I worry. I'm really good at worrying. I'm an expert at worrying. I didn't put that in my bio. And things don't get or get darker. So I stay up a lot at night and worry. So if I had a superpower that would help me live a longer life, it would be to just lie down and go to sleep like that. That would be perfect. I got the exercise down. I got the socialization down. It's the sleep piece that I need help with.
You're missing that piece on the checklist.
And
And the flying would just be fun to see things from an
yeah,
observational
I
level. Is that
love to travel, and that
Mhm.
is one of my passions, and I would love to just be able to, like Bewitched, if you remember Bewitched, just wiggle my nose, be somewhere else, and
Uh,
going to who wants to go to the airport anymore or deal with baggage
right.
claim? I could just get a little backpack and just fly myself somewhere.
Right. Between the Jetsons and Back to the Future, we were promised all kinds of things we're still waiting
I
for. We'll see how that goes and feeds into the opportunity to fly. I have this very strong feeling that you have benefited from being connected to and offering advice to others and being connected to really great people throughout your life in general, professionally, personally. Is there any particular piece of advice that you carry with you that you also would want to share? If it's learn to fly, that's cool too. But if there's a particular piece that really has stuck with you and you wanted to share.
Oh, I've had a great advice. This is a hard question. I haven't had this question before. I think I learned from my parents to be persistent and optimistic. So
Mm.
don't give up. My dad had a quote from Harry Truman, I think. Maybe it was Harry Truman. I have to track this down. It talks about the importance of the person who is persistent and who keeps
Mm.
trying and tries again. And that is certainly in my DNA, as well as being optimistic and to look on the brighter side of things and to be grateful for everything that you have. So lucky to be um, living in this day and age, even with all of the challenges we have. We're living longer. We have a lot of medicine, vaccines. We have more than any other generation from medical. So I would say persistence and optimism and faith. Yeah, those three
Those
things.
are fantastic. Yeah, I think those are really wonderful and a great way to put an exclamation point on our conversation. Of course, as I mentioned for the show notes, to make sure to put the link to Seniority Authority's website, which is the easiest way to listen to a podcast. You just go there, click, and you can search and see, and then find yourself enjoying another episode and then another episode, which is a fabulous thing. So, of course, I'll put that. Are there any other resources and any social media you'd to have linked? Are there any other resources before we wrap up? You're thinking, oh, I totally meant to mention that.
No, I
And
think the Medicare.gov is a really important piece that a lot of people are of if you're actually looking for resources. I would say if anyone has questions, reach out to me directly at info@seniorityauthority.org and happy to answer questions. If anyone has topics they're curious about, to reach out. But I just want to keep feeding people's.
yeah, curiosity is a fabulous thing and something universally that is a tool we all cultivate in different ways. Will make sure to do that on the video version. I actually put a slide at the end with that also. Not only is it in the show notes, but also visually. So someone
Awesome.
hit pause and be able to write it down if they're using actual writing implements. As we talk about technology as well. So, with that, we will wrap up. I greatly appreciate anyone listening or watching the Navigating Solo podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any questions, topics, ideas, any of the things Kathleen was also nice enough to mention, you can also send us an email at info@navigatingsolo.com. If for some reason that's how you would like to also connect with Kathleen, I am happy to pass that along as well. And so with that, I encourage everyone until next time to stay empowered and connected. I'm your host, Ailene Gerhardt, and this is the Navigating Solo podcast.